Hey guys, welcome to another video. In today's video I'm gonna be doing the brakes here on the Cobra, front brakes and rear, and also we're gonna be doing the struts up front, shocks on the back, so stay tuned.
Music bed.
Alright, so this is pretty simple to take off. This calipers have this pin right here on the bottom, and there's a small E-clip here on the end of this, which you just gotta take off. So these are the little E-clip here and the little washer that they have in there. If you're going to be reusing this pin, make sure you don't lose that. And then you just slide this pin right out. Straightforward. I bought a new hardware kit which comes with all this new, but this is in good condition, so I'm just going to put it aside. You just never know, you lose one of the clips or, you know, later on. If you guys ever wanted to do a Cobra brake upgrade on your GT, it's pretty straightforward. You know, you can buy your rotors anywhere and calipers as well. You order them like on Amazon or something. You can get them with brackets and they bolt right onto the GT. The only thing is you'll have to get your new caliper bolt. But usually if you buy a new caliper with the bracket, they come with the new banjo bolt. So you know, it's pretty straightforward swap for a GT. Anywho, put that aside. Now you can get a piece of wire or something just to hang your caliper when you take it off. That way it doesn't hang from the post. So you just pull it up. And you know, if you're only doing brake pads, then at this point you can just put your new pads in here, slap it back in. But I don't know if you can see, actually it was already hitting a little bit of metal on the wear sensor there, slightly. So there's, yeah, a little bit of a groove here on the rotor. There's not really much left on this pad here on top. A little bit more on top. So what that tells me is, besides this broken pad, it wasn't wearing evenly. Probably because of the, well, shoot. The hardware was kind of loose on this car. Maybe no lube in there, but I'm gonna push the caliper back in, or the yeah, both of the caliper pistons back in, make sure they're free, because if you see the outside pad, it has a little bit more life left. So this is got a little bit more. So keep that in mind, you know, if it's not wearing evenly when you push these back in. Just kind of keep track and see if they push in easily or they're kind of hard. I'm going to get my C-clamp now and do it. I guess as I'm right here on the spot. Alright, so I got my specialty tool C-clamp. These are just normal, so C-clamp works really well. I use a brake pad and just, you know, tie it in that way. For the rears, I do have to use the specialty tool that turns the piston at the same time as it pushes it in, but I'll show you guys in a moment or later on. the pistons did push in really well. The boots are good. So I'm guessing just lack of lube on the actual here on the where the pads kind of slide. So that's what made it wear out unevenly. But caliper's pretty clean. I'm just gonna, once I take all this off, I'm gonna clean it a little bit with oil eater and then do the paint. But make sure you don't let it hang by the brake hose. So just get yourself one of these hooks. They're pretty inexpensive. Actually, they come in a 2-pack, or a piece of wire or something, just so you can hang it in there. Once you do that, you're gonna get the bolt for the bracket here. So get yourself a socket. It's 15 millimeter, and if regular socket fits, nope. I'm using a deep socket here on the top because the bolt for the strut's kind of on the way. Now I guess I'm taking those off too, but I'm doing one thing at a time, I guess. All right, so I gotta loosen these. It's probably gonna be kind of tight, so I'm gonna use my hammer here. All right, so if you turn the steering wheel a little bit, you get more room here to get an impact, because those were really tight. And with an impact, you just a couple of ugga-duggas and they're loose. So if you have an impact, if not, breaker bar, but watch your knuckles. All right, so got your 2 bolts, your bracket. Your rotor should slip right out unless it's kind of seized in there. But as you can see, it has that little groove from the brake pad. So I have to turn those a little bit. You can check your hub at this point. Since we're right here, I'm gonna pretty much just show you guys the probably the removal here of the strut. So I'm just gonna give myself a 24, I believe. So get my ugga-dugga again. The first one is just a little skinny nut that holds the bracket for your ABS sensor. I'm gonna unclip it from over here, that way it has more room to move around. Then the bolts on the inside are the actual strut ones. So yep, 21. Alright, now that the compressor's off, so keep track of what comes out of there. Obviously on top you have a bushing like this with the washer. Now you can buy a new strut mount on top and replace it, but just keep in mind, so this is what came out of here. This is how this goes. So you have your I don't know, like your dust shield with this metal piece on top, and then you have your this is like your bottom out bushing. So if you bottom out, this kind of helps dampen. So just keep in mind how that went when you put it on the new one. Surprisingly, this strut still has some little bit of life left. So, maybe I can sell them for a couple dollars. They do still go back up very slowly, and they're very easy to push down. We'll check the new ones here, but So these are the new ones here. They are a lot harder to push down. Way harder than the other ones. So. Probably was about time to put new ones in there. I'm gonna get a little bit of grease, just put it on this bushing here so it slides easier in there. This is just some white lithium grease, so it goes in there easier. Gonna put this in there and that little spacer on there. So installation's reverse of how it came out. Just make sure that you use the nut that the new strut came with. Usually they come with the new nut for the top, so this is gonna be even a different size, but it's okay. It's gonna be a 24 like the other one. So I'm gonna put this here ready. I'm gonna put a slightly little bit of grease also here on top where it's gonna ride on that strut mount. And installation is same thing as removal. And I'm just gonna put the nut here on top lightly by hand to kind of hold it. Now this is probably where it's gonna be a little bit of a pain in the butt to lift this one, since it's a little bit harder. Gotta compress it. So. All right. Now this will most definitely be easier if you put your jack stand on the body and you let your control arm drop, then you can control it with the jack, other than you know, try to pull the strut up. But alright, I just had to fight with it a little bit, so I was just pushing it up, and then I was able to get it in there as I was going down. So definitely, like I said, if you put your jack stand underneath the body over there and, you know, once you get that set, put your jack underneath here. You can control that and it'll be easier, but I didn't think of that before I did it. So anyways, if you need to change your camber, they have the bolts, caster camber bolts here that you can put in. That's adjustable, or you can use the caster camber place for the top. So you know, that's something that you may need if your vehicle is lowered or anything. Make sure you torque these to Ugga spec. But in all seriousness, yeah, your torque specs and torque them after. I'll leave this loose so I can go back in there. So that's pretty much done. I'm gonna actually get the top nut bolted down and then I'll torque it after. Alright, so once all that's done, what I like to do is clean my bracket and caliper. I already sprayed it with oil eater and brake cleaner, you know, use a little brush. And I like using this. It's a duplicate caliper paint that comes in a little tub. This stuff has worked really well for me. And I had this, it's really hard to find anymore. I don't know if they even make it, but I had this for probably like, I'm not even lying here, probably like 15 years. But it's still got a little bit on the bottom. You just gotta use a paintbrush and then you just brush it on. So, you know, it takes a little bit of time, but I just do a few coats. After you do like 2-3 coats, it looks really nice. It looks like almost if you would have sprayed it with a can, but this stuff just seems to go on there thicker, last a long time. So I like using this stuff. And like I said, this brand works really well. I used other brands, it don't really seem like it lasts much. Like any caliper paint, unless you actually take the brackets off and spray them with like car paint with, you know, clear coat and all that. If you start using a lot of brake cleaner on here, it's gonna start to kind of come off. So you can always kind of spray it, clean it, but if you keep like spraying and wiping, you know, like rubbing it, then it'll start coming off. But it's better than the spray stuff. Anyways, I'm gonna do a couple coats here, some on the caliper, and then I just don't like to spray with the pads. I don't like the pads getting the paint. And then once it's all put together, I'll go back and touch up any spots that might have scratched. So that's what I'm doing next. Alright, so I went ahead and got the bracket and the caliper painted, got the shock installed. I already did the other side, but everything's the same, so I'm just going to show you one side. you saw on the caliper, I did paint the whole thing, even the letters. Once it's dry though, I got a little razor blade and just you know, took the Cobra off so you can see the polish. Let it dry so it's not tacky, but I would say don't let it dry more than overnight because this stuff gets pretty hard, and if you try to scratch it off, it's gonna chip. So you want it to be dry but not too dry, if that makes sense. The other thing I'm gonna do is replace the hubs. When I turn them, you can't hear them on the camera probably, but when I turn it, there's a little bit of noise in the bearing. And if you ever hear on your car, like when you're turning slightly to one side or the other, like a little squeak, you know, usually it's your bearings. So you got to take this little cap off. Just pretty tight in there. It's probably never been off, which, I mean, you never have to take off unless you're replacing this, but just, you know, force it a little bit and then go all the way around and force it a little bit at a time. These are like a plastic with metal, so, you know, don't damage them. Just push it right in there a little bit and then force it out all the way around. Make sure your screwdriver is pretty sharp. Once you do that, you want to get your socket. This is a 36 millimeter. If it's a little bit loose, but it'll do the job. And then if it's really tight, you know, when I use a breaker shear bar on there. I could probably use my impact in here, but let's just do it this way. Make sure when you're putting that much pressure, your socket doesn't slip and you go and dent your fender, or, you know, hit your camera or pop your knuckles. Once it's loose, it's just gonna come off. It's gonna be still a little bit tight, but not too bad. This is a pretty special nut in there, so. And then once that's off, this should pull out. Sometimes if the bearing's really, you know, if it's seized in there, it's gonna break apart. This one, I think it's just had a little bit of noise from being old, but they're not too bad. But they were making a little bit of noise. And this is going to be the new hub assembly. So you just put it back in there, and that's it. And then just tying it back. So I'm gonna get the torque specs and get that. Alright, so once this is torqued down, put your little dust cap back on. I put it in there, just kind of tap it, and then use, you know, something like this and go all the way around. Put your brake rotor in there. So your brake rotors, you know, it just depends. You can get new ones. You know, if they're not bad, you can reuse them. I like to at least resurface them, like I did this one. Now these are the rotors that were on the Saline. They're the same rotors, so they didn't really have that many of marks on them or anything. So I used those. I went and resurfaced them. And you can get that done at your local parts store. They usually charge between $15 and $20. I know the guys at the local parts store here, so they let me just go and cut them. But you know, if you have them cut them, they'll be about $15, $20 a piece, so it's not too bad. And they should measure them for you. If they're not able to get turned, they'll let you know. So now I'll go ahead and put the caliper bracket in there. And I do have a little bit of blue thread locker in the threads on these. So next I'm gonna put my caliper here and put my brake pads on there. And this is the little hardware clips that come with the pads. These are actually pretty nice. They have a rubber insulator in the clips, so never seen them that way, but so make sure that you lubricate your caliper, your pads. That way you don't get no squeaking. So I'm gonna lubricate around the piston, everywhere that the pad's gonna contact the piston here. And then on this other side, pretty much everywhere where the pad's gonna touch the metal. This really is what keeps your brake pads from squeaking. Doesn't matter if you get like cheap brake pads or anything, or expensive pads. If you don't do this, they'll usually end up squeaking. So, and then I'm gonna put a little bit on this little metal tabs, since they're gonna be clipped onto the metal. And so you just want to align them. And make sure all the clips are kind of aligned, because you're gonna push them in, so, and they just pop in place. And just make sure, since these ones are kind of directional, this side with the little cutout goes to the bottom, because that's where the pin's gonna slide. If you put them the other way around, you know, they're not gonna, the pin's not gonna be able to slide through there. And then I'll put a little bit of lubricant here on top where this is gonna ride on the caliper. And some on these clips, because they're gonna ride on the caliper as well. And then you just hook them in there on the bottom and just guide them in. Now before I lube the pan, I like to make sure that it goes in there. And then I'm just gonna put a little bit of lube on this pin here, since the pads are pretty much gonna be sliding a little bit in there. And make sure you put the little clip. What I'm gonna do now, so this is pretty much done here. We're gonna move to the rear and start doing the rear. I am gonna crack open the bleeder and I'll show you guys here in a moment, but what I do is usually gravity bleed these, so I'll crack this open and just let it drip while I do the rear. Just to get new fluid, so you know, I'll keep an eye on the brake master cylinder, and then you know, once it goes down I'll add more till I get clean fluid coming out of here. So you know, I put a hose so it doesn't run all over the metal. I'm gonna also touch up the rotors or the calipers here. There's a couple like here where I had that hook, I scratched it, so I'll touch up this little piece here with the red paint, and any place that, you know, I scratched it. Some here on the back, but that's pretty much done for the front. We'll go ahead and get started on the rear. Alright, so we're working on the back brakes now. Pretty much almost the same as the front, except the caliper to push that piston in, it's a little bit different, so we'll go over that. I'm gonna go ahead and start by removing these two here on top, which are a 13 millimeter. Now with these, sometimes like the brake hose on this side here, it gets on the way of your ratchet. Same with the like a parking brake spring here, it gets on the way of your ratchet. So you can either use like your wrench, just a regular wrench, or put like maybe an extension. So either way. We got the bolts, just gonna set them aside. All right, now to take this off, it's gonna not have a lot of slack here with the parking brake. The parking brake is not on or anything, it's just the way that cable is. So, you know, once it comes out, you pretty much have to push it back because you don't have much room to pull it out. Same when you're gonna put it in, you know, you have to kind of go around the pads and then just slide it in there. So we're just gonna let that hang. Now I'm not too worried about letting this one hang because the parking brake cable pretty much holds it there in place, so it's not putting much strain on that brake hose here on top. But you know, you can always get your little hook and put it up here. So we'll slide the brake pads off. This one's pretty much coming apart, back shim. Hardware's broken. Same with the inner side. Once these are off, we'll take both of these bolts off here for the bracket. Those are 15 millimeter. Now if you're only doing the pads, obviously you don't have to remove these or the bracket. You do want to take these out and clean them and lube them, but put your bolt aside. But if you're only doing pads, you're not changing rotors or surfacing them, then you don't have to remove these. I would recommend always at least resurfacing the rotors, but you know, I guess it just depends if you're just trying to get new pads on there. And then now this here, this is a good example of what happens when that lube, you know, wears out. I can't even turn this pin. Whoa. So that was seized in there. You can see there's no lube really left. It just started to kind of, probably got some dirt and wanted to rust in there. So I'll clean that really well, put lube on that. That's what's going to prevent the caliper from sliding really good, and your brake pads are not going to wear out evenly. And that's, you know, you can see here, on these old pads. I'm not sure if you can see too well, but let's see here. Grab my light. So you can see the outside one was worn out pretty much to the metal. The inside had about 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 left. And that's what happens. You know, your caliper doesn't slide, so only one side wears out. And your rotor should slide right out. Now at this point, you know, you can start cleaning and putting your rotor back in. Since I'm doing the shocks here, I'm gonna go ahead and take these off. All right, so the shock here on the bottom, it's gonna be 18 millimeter. On the inside, there's like a nut here. And I'm just gonna hold the bolt on the other side. Take that out. And then we're gonna go inside. Of the trunk. I'm not sure if you guys be able to see really well in here. Let me. Where's the flashlight? All right. So here's the trunk area. You guys have to pull out the inner, you know, kind of liner there, and then the bolts are right in here. And take that bolt out of there, and then here on the back's the 18 millimeter. You just loosen the nut, take that one out, and you can slide that one right out. All right. So there's that. I'm just gonna go ahead and put the nut on the inside. And then I'm gonna go ahead and put this other strut or shock here. And just get the 50 millimeter tied up. And that's it. Don't forget to put the nut and the bushing on the top in the trunk. And this goes this way, and then with the new nut. And what I'm gonna do now is just clean off the caliper here. That way I can get it painted and ready for the brake pads. got the caliper painted last night. Let it dry. You know, if you're gonna be painting your calipers, you want to let them dry for quite a bit. Obviously, if you don't have too much time, I would probably suggest painting them, you know, with the pads and everything on there. You just gotta be, if you're using a brush like I did, I mean, you can get in the corners and, you know, makes it easier. But I know you can buy the spray pan, and with that you gotta mask, you know, things and things like that. So just depends what you're gonna do. But anyways, we're gonna get the everything put back together here. So I do have the brake rotor, so I'm just gonna give it a quick spray here. Brake cleaner. And same thing with these rotors. These were the ones off the saline I have. They were just overall in better condition. I put new ones on that one, and I kept these, but I got them surfaced as well, so got a new nice surface. And really, they didn't really need much taken off. These were really nice and flat. I think I took the minimal amount off. So putting them on there, I'm putting a nuts here so it holds it in place, and I'm gonna put the caliper bracket in here. I got a little bit of Loctite on the bolt. Alright, so I lost my ratchet there for a second, but found it. So we're gonna get the 15 millimeter and tighten these up. Just like that. And now we're gonna get our brake pads here. So I have all new hardware. Gonna put this on the caliper first. Just a little clip pretty much that pushes those pads in. And this one you have to slip in the long piece in the caliper so you can push it outwards enough to get the other piece in. And then you push it back towards the inside of the caliper so that this piece here goes over this little notch. And I'm gonna get my caliper or my brake grease here, and then just put grease on these. I like to put a generous amount on these because you know, they gotta lube the hole they go in. And put them in, and then make sure the rubber piece goes over that lip at the edge so it seals it. And these have a little notch. This notch goes towards the inside of the caliper because that's where it kind of hits the caliper so they don't turn when you're bolting on that bolt. So with that grease, now they slide in and out way easier. You remember before when I tried to take them out, I couldn't pull it out because it was pretty much seized in there. So, and then these little clips are what go on the brake pad. Now sometimes they're a little loose, so you just gotta kind of squeeze them a little bit, but they're just gonna kind of sit right there on the edge, and they're just gonna keep them tight. So I'm gonna put a little bit of the lubricant here on the caliper, pretty much where those clips are gonna be hidden, right in that area. And so sometimes you can put them on the edge and slide them in. or you just put them on the beginning of the caliper and just kind of push them towards the inside. So just put them like this. And just tap them lightly. And they're just gonna be tight because of the new clips here. So, you know, if you had like the old clips or whatever, then they might go in easier, but no big deal. Just tap them in. I mean, you shouldn't have to get like a hammer and really force them, but just tap them lightly. And then I'm gonna put a little bit of lube here on these clips where they're gonna touch the caliper as well. Last but not least, gonna put some of this lube on the actual piston where it's gonna be hitting the pad, and on the 2 tabs that'll be hitting the outside pads. Gonna get my bolts ready here by putting just tiny little bit of Loctite. And like I said before, with these, you know, this caliper doesn't have a lot of room to like pull it out, so you're just gonna kind of slip it through and then just let it go in there. And I'll go ahead and do my bottom bolt here first. All right, so now we're all set. You know, that's pretty much the install of the pads, front and rear. Now that this is all taken care of, I'm just gonna go back with my paint and just touch up the caliper where I scratched it a little bit. You know, that usually happens when you're trying to move it around and put it back in place. So I just have